Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are jumping right into a seriously gripping story called The Last Claim. We're going to dive deep into the brutal, freezing reality of the Klondike gold rush. But, honestly, more importantly, we're exploring the absolute psychological limits of human endurance. Because this isn't just a story about digging for gold in the ice. It's a really profound look at what happens when our grandest, most desperate ambitions collide head-on with unforgiving reality.
The entire narrative is anchored by this profound realization from our protagonist, Elias Vance. The gold he found would not be in the ground. Elias is a guy who essentially chose near certain death in the Yukon over having to go home and admit defeat to his family. This quote really is the thesis of his entire journey. But to understand how he gets to that realization, we have to look at the impossible choice he faced.
Part 1. The Last Steamer. Dawson City, 1898.
Let's set the scene here. It's September. The freezing rain is just turning the streets to absolute mud, and the final steamer out of the Yukon, the Portland, is blasting its whistle. It has to leave before the river freezes solid, which would trap anyone left behind for the next 8 months. And as he watches that boat, Elias is running some really brutal math in his head. A steamer ticket to Seattle costs $45. His total remaining funds, just $53 and change. If he buys that ticket, he returns to his wife, Margaret, and daughter, Claire, with exactly $8. $8 after a year and a half of being away. He realizes that going home means returning as a total failure, literally the punchline to his father-in-law's jokes. And that is a narrative he absolutely refuses to accept. So, he lets the boat leave without him. Driven by just sheer stubbornness and a really deep sense of shame, Elias pivots. He gambles his absolute last dollars on the bare minimum needed to survive: flour, beans, and bacon. He buys transportation to an abandoned, played-out claim ominously named Fool's End, which is located 8 miles up Fool's Creek. He is fully committing to surviving the winter out there entirely alone.
Section 2. Descent into the permafrost, the physical grind.
You see, placer mining in the Arctic permafrost is a maddeningly inefficient reality. You can't just dig a hole. First, Elias has to build a fire directly on the frozen ground just to thaw it out. Then he has to frantically dig out the thawed muck and gravel before the Arctic air refreezes it in literally minutes. Then he repeats the process, endlessly. He is burning through his vital, life-saving firewood supply just to dig a hole, inches at a time, battling exhaustion in temperatures that drop to 40 below zero. And his physical descent into that 20-foot shaft perfectly mirrors his descent into the crushing northern winter. He departs Dawson in September. By December, total darkness sets in. The sun just simply vanishes. In January, right when he actually starts making progress, the shaft catastrophically floods, and by March his only companion, a lone wolf, dies. Every foot he digs deeper into the earth aligns with a deeper, darker level of winter isolation.
Section 3. The white silence, the psychological toll. The Yukon isn't just physically demanding, it's completely mentally devastating. Before he left Dawson, his guide, Joseph LaBelle, gave him this chilling warning: alone is just a state of being. Lonely will kill you out here. By December, with only a few hours of dim twilight a day, Elias faces a sensory deprivation that threatens to completely shatter his mind. He fights this by actually crossing that line, constantly talking out loud to himself, to his tools, and to the fire, just to stay tethered to human reality.
But he isn't entirely without company. A lone, starving wolf becomes this constant watcher at the tree line. It's such a striking mirror image. Elias is the stubborn human interloper, freezing, starving for gold and validation. And the wolf is the native survivor, isolated from its pack, literally starving for food. They just sit across the snow from one another, two fools trying to survive the impossible.
Part 4. The flooded shaft, expectation versus reality.
Just when the psychological pressure peaks, the physical reality breaks him. Down at 20 feet deep, suffocating from bad air, Elias nearly gives up and just lets the darkness take him. But a sudden howl from the wolf snaps him right back. He keeps digging, and amazingly, he strikes bedrock, painting about $80 in gold flakes. It's proof. Dawson was wrong. The gold is actually there. But that triumph instantly turns to absolute catastrophe. His pickaxe hits a fissure, and a pressurized underground spring ruptures. Within minutes, the entire shaft is completely filled with freezing ice water.
He barely escapes with his life. And the next morning, he looks outside to find that the water has frozen into a solid column of ice. Months of brutal, life-threatening labor, every fire, every bucket of muck, every single inch of depth are now encased in solid ice, sealing the bedrock forever. His dream of a massive strike is utterly destroyed in an instant, forcing him to just wait out the rest of the winter in completely empty silence. Section 5. The Real Gold. The Alchemy of Character. But Elias doesn't break. The winter breaks first. Spring finally arrives. The wolf tragically dies of starvation in March, but Elias survives. And with nothing else to do before the river thaws, he just starts panning the old, discarded dirt pile he'd hauled out months earlier. In a final, almost mocking twist of fate, he finds a $50 nugget right there in the dirt he'd previously ignored. This brings his grand total yield for a year and a half of near-death suffering to an incredibly anticlimactic $243.15. That is about 44 cents a day for near starvation.
But this sparks a massive internal shift for him. Elias realizes that the earth didn't reveal its treasures systematically or fairly. It simply was what it was. Success in prospecting, and honestly, like much of life, often comes down to just random geological luck. You can work harder than any man alive. You can suffer way more. You can endure the white silence, and the earth still owes you absolutely nothing. It isn't a reflection of his personal worth. It's literally just physics and geology.
So the true climax of this explainer isn't sudden wealth at all. It's the return home. The Klondike gamble yielded a one-time, agonizing $243 payoff. But the Seattle reality requires him to swallow his pride and accept a steady, unglamorous $15 a week drafting job. Because what he actually excavated out of that frozen ground was his own character. He rejected the narrative of failure. He survived absolute isolation. He discovered his own irreducible endurance, the real bedrock of his soul. And because he faced the absolute worst the world could throw at him and didn't shudder, he finally learned how to just show up for ordinary life. He learned that being a reliable father and husband working a $15 a week job requires a different but equally profound type of endurance. It's such an incredible transformation, and it leaves us with a really compelling question to ponder. When our grandest dreams collapse, when our own personal shafts flood with ice water, and the things we thought would validate us just wash away, how do you measure your own gold? And what would you be willing to endure to strip away the noise and find your true bedrock? Think about that as you navigate your own challenges this week. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.